Hello everyone, it's the Metal Geek. How y'all doing? I would like to welcome you back to another episode of Gaming Spotlight, where we take a look at the game and spotlight it, but it's not a full review. These are just really good games that I think you should go check out. And today, we're going to be looking at Final Fantasy VI. Originally released in October of 1994, the game was developed by Squaresoft, now known as Square Enix. Final Fantasy VI was launched on the Super Nintendo as Final Fantasy III in North America. Not to overly confuse things, but Final Fantasy I had been released both in Japan, on the Famicom, and in the US on the NES. Final Fantasy II and III, or at least the originals, were not released in the US. They were only released on the original Famicom in Japan. In Japan, Final Fantasy IV was in development for the Super Nintendo. That game got released into the US, but because it was only the second Final Fantasy game to make it into the US, it was retitled to be called Final Fantasy II. Final Fantasy V was not released in the US for the Super Nintendo, and because of that, when Final Fantasy VI was, it was actually only the third Final Fantasy game to make it into the US, or at least in the main line. Just prior to that, Final Fantasy Mystic Quest did come out, but it was considered a beginner's RPG, or a spin-off in this case. Of course, Final Fantasy VI would be released under its original title later down the line for the PlayStation, as well as for the Game Boy Advance and many other systems at this point, including on mobile phones. But let's not dwell on that. Let's take a look at the game itself. Final Fantasy VI is an epic, sprawling RPG. This game is huge. I mean, it is absolutely massive, boasting 14 characters, and most of those characters get significant story development. This game, at the time, had one of the biggest character rosters out there. You could have up to 4 characters in your party at once. Each character had their own abilities. For example, Locke was a thief, so he could steal things. Edgar was a king and a mechanist, and because of that, he was really good with tools and had weapons that were specific to him. Shadow was a ninja, so he had the throw ability, so he could basically throw any weapon to do extra damage. Sabin was a martial artist, so he had a bunch of moves that were completely unique to him, called blitzes. Basically, cross Street Fighter with RPGs, and that was Sabin. All in all, basically every character had an individual trait that was unique to them. Almost every character could learn magic through the use of espers, which, again, if you want to find out a little bit more about this game and its story and what it's all about, check out my bigger review later down the line when I release it. But the idea is that even though every character, for the most part, could learn magic, every character was a personality of their own. And that was just something that was absolutely pretty amazing. The fact that a character who was a thief could actually just steal something, or a character that was a martial artist that had specific martial art moves that were unique to him, that was something that was really awesome. And quite frankly, that was the one thing that was really missing about Final Fantasy VII, which is the Final Fantasy course a lot of people do praise for being the greatest Final Fantasy ever. But I would argue that Final Fantasy VI pretty much laid down all the groundwork and did it better. Kefka, one of the most villainous of all characters when it comes to RPGs, is just, well, funny enough, a joy to actually behold. But he's also a very dangerous character. This is a character that, quite frankly, wants to accomplish something. And, well, he actually does. And I don't want to get too much into the story, as again, this is something I will cover in my larger review later down the line, but he wants to kind of destroy the world, and at one point, he almost does. In fact, he actually kind of does. Not to the point where, of course, extinction happens, but he does accomplish something that does change the landscape of the world, and that's just something that you've never really saw in an RPG up to that point. Final Fantasy VI is just full of charming characters. It has a great storyline, probably one of the best in the entire series. If you love steampunk, this is the RPG for you. And the music. Oh my, the music. Easily, this game has one of the best soundtracks ever made. So go check out Final Fantasy VI. Let me know what you think. And this is the Metal Geek saying, have a great one.